$5. Vivi waggled her index finger. You have one prepaid swear word left. Tempted to give her all the money he had in his wallet so he could swear up a blue streak, Remington reached for the cash, but his toddler half-brothers watched him with mesmerized eyes. I'm no more thrilled to get stuck in that paramilitary black SUV with you than you are to have me there, said a tart female voice from the other entryway into the den, this one from the dining room. He stared across the room, his gaze clashing with the woman standing there. Their eyes narrowed at each other like gunslingers squaring off on the dusty streets of Tombstone. Looking at Aria Alzate, knowing what was ahead of him for the next several days, Remington made a brash forecast. Thrown together for several days in forced proximity, they would either learn to get along or tear each other from limb to limb. Remington's money was on the latter. He groaned and briefly closed his eyes. You could have warned me that she was in the next room, Vivi. Look, Vivi said. I know you two get along like cats and dogs, but I need you both to play nice and get this done. Got it? Remington opened his eyes and studied the stunning woman standing in the doorway. Aria Alzate was a major pain in the ass, but she was sure pretty to look at. Slim and trim, but curvy in all the right places. She studied him through lowered eyelids, thick with long dark lashes. Her father, Armand, was Mescalero Apache, and she'd inherited his straight black hair and high cheekbones, while also inheriting a pale, creamy complexion from her Irish mother, Bridget. She was an interesting contrast of dark and light. Remington had known her his entire life, although he hadn't seen her much in the 12 years he'd been in the Army, most of those spent as a paratrooper. On the few occasions she'd been home when he'd returned on leave, they'd made a point never to be in the same room alone together. They'd always rubbed each other the wrong way, and they literally had nothing in common. Aria was impulsive, rebellious, quirky, and something of a busybody. Everything Remington was not. They'd grown up together on the Silver Feather in an arid, isolated stretch of the Trans-Pecos, nestled in the shadow of the Davis Mountains. Her family had worked for the Lockharts. Her father had been the ranch foreman until he'd retired, and his son Archer took over. Her mother had been their housekeeper. In those terrible times, after his mother, Lucy, died when Remington was 10, Bridget acted as a surrogate mother to him and his 3 brothers, Ridge, Ranger, and Rhett. At the moment, Remington was living on the Silver Feather because his paternal grandfather, Cyril, had left the 4 oldest Lockhart grandsons. This was before Dad had Rory and Reed with Vivi, 2-acre parcels of land on each quadrant of the 100,000-acre spread. Nice of him, but as with everything involving his father's family, there was a catch. None of the 4 brothers could sell their places without approval from the entire family, and Remington's father would never grant his permission. So, knowing he had few options with the land, he had a house built on his property while living in a 5th-wheel trailer. His contractors had just finished building the house, giving him something to occupy his mind while he recovered from his injuries and adjusted to civilian life. But things still felt alien. He'd been away for 12 years. Living in a third-world country had shown him a whole other way of being, and he wasn't really sure who he was anymore, now that he was no longer an Army Ranger. Besides, Aria reminded him too much of who he used to be, the wild kid he'd worked so hard to shed. Yes, he and Aria found themselves forever tied, and not just because of their pasts, but also since his 3 brothers had all married her 3 sisters. He might as well get used to having her around. It was a weird family dynamic, especially when everyone seemed to expect him and Aria to get together too, just because the others had all gotten together. Yeah, over his dead body. The woman was sexy, but she was a bona fide flake. She acted first and thought, well, Aria didn't think, did she? Neither before, during, or after.